everyone, welcome to First Phase Media. I am Marc, and today we'll interview Peter Wojcik, CEO of Pharmagreen Biotech, a Nevada-based company specializing in the advanced science of tissue culture. How are you, Peter?
Very good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. For those who aren't familiar with your company, could you say a bit of his story?
Yes, Pharmagreen Biotech Inc. Became public in 2018. We started the company in 2015. The original name was WFS Pharmagreen, which was a Canadian company. We were actually in the space of building cultivation space in Canada. Unfortunately, we were too quick to our construction site. We were ready to go in late 2014. Just to make a long story short, we built $1 million hydroponics facility, even brought on board Tommy Chong for brand endorsement. Unfortunately, Health Canada said no to any branding place with cannabis, and the city where we built the facility said no to any commercial facilities. So we kind of put the cultivation side on hold, and we started to really concentrate on more science, which is the science of tissue culture. We'll dive into it as we go further along in the interview. Fast forward to now, basically went public 2018, and we saw that the cannabis space, due to just the very small market size overall in Canada, we had much better option to execute our plan in California, and we're just in the midst of an imminent completed acquisition of Long Valley Farms in Leggett, California.
And so what specific services does the company provide?
So the services we're focusing on is very highly scientific. So first of all, our end goal is to provide therapeutic formulas of high efficacy rate. So in other words, I'm really looking after to be beneficial to humans, something you can actually, feel or experience. A good example of that would be CBD. If you have inflammation, you take the right amounts of it, you will see almost an immediate reduction in inflammation, therefore pain and everything else. So that's because of, that was the attraction to me of cannabis, was always the therapeutic side. Coming from a medical family background, mom was stricken with cancer, and I was doing extractions of THC for a good decade, 5 years ago, with great success rate. So that's kind of the products would be based under the Pharmagreen brand. And because of the current cannabis space where it is, in terms of the raw material being the market very saturated, we always prided ourselves as Pharmagreen that we're going to be building a company that's beyond just cannabis. And that's exactly what we announced recently. And that's our immediate focus is right now. We've planted over 200 therapeutic or medical value plant species on the farm as well. And we're looking to get into the development of therapeutic formulas that have, high efficacy rate for those who wish to try them.
And sorry.
Oh, additionally, I was going to say, so that's our immediate on the therapeutics, but we build the company based on technologies of tissue culture. So tissue culture process is basically producing plants in a clean room lab environment, sterile environment, where you guarantee no bugs, no diseases, no genetic drift. That is a huge competitive advantage as opposed to the starter plantlets being generated in greenhouses where they're susceptible to those conditions. And most importantly, genetic drift, creating the starter plantlets and taking the tips of a living mother plant. A good analogy is like cut yourself once, it hurts. Cut yourself 500 times and you go into septic shock. Same thing the mother plant experiences. That's why there's a very high ratio of genetic drift. And today's strains are really done very quickly using, genetics type of equipment, CRISPR technology, where you're really isolating and increasing the content of THC and other cannabinoids that pharmaceuticals and retail market wants. But there's a give and take. Doing that type of gene editing comes with very weak genetics overall. So if you can reproduce using tissue culture and not cause any stresses, you will always preserve that genetic print, whether you produce one plantlet or a million of them in terms of starter plantlets. So that's very big. That's what our core of the technology is. To produce therapeutic formulas, you really need the answer to have the unabated, very clean biomass that's produced scientifically through the plant generation.
Okay. And if we're taking a look at the market, how big is the market?
The market, call it for cannabis, in my opinion, while it's limited, it's big competition. You see in the current results of all these entries into cannabis, there is a glut of the raw material, call it for one. That's why we always build the company in mind from day one to be recession proof. So for whatever reason, if cannabis space was for as the reason as I described, reaches those conditions, our technology can produce any plant species on the planet. We just have to develop the protocols that drives the actual SOP, standard operating procedures, for the production of the starter plantlets. And that's exactly right now where we have taken the company. We have licenses in application for Long Valley Farms beyond cultivation. We're expecting to receive our micro business license, which will allow us extraction, distribution, and eventually also retail. But that distribution and extraction license would allow us to sell products beyond just the raw biomass, which we have plenty of in storage and are looking to sell. So we've taken a very keen interest, and we have proprietary steps in terms of doing press technology of live rosin. What is live rosin? Well, if you look at the cannabis plant and all its therapeutics, we've always called for, and Israelis tabled that in 1960s, called the entourage effect. So in other words, if you can capture more of the plant's cannabinoids or its essential oil, the more of a therapeutic benefit you get, and it's more of a symbiosis, or call it in complement, in what your endocannabinoid system wants. In other words, a little bit of everything, and not just overloading with CBD alone, which can produce a negative loop back if you just continue taking CBD by itself. So to get to that, entourage, live rosin is basically you cultivate the plant, which the facility is certified non-spray, non-veganic, very clean biomass. So you don't need to do all these distillation procedures to purify it, because you already have very clean biomass. And then when you press it, press technology is simply applying pressure to it. And with the end result, you get the oils oozing out of the plant, and you're capturing everything the plant has, most importantly, terpenes, which are proving to have a very high medical benefit, as opposed to just a single cannabinoid like CBD and CBG. So that in itself, and then if we have the right genetics and we grow these specific strains, whether they're tailored to a retail experience or whether they're tailored towards a therapeutic benefit, and extracting that entire component of the plant, this is where our formulations are going to be based on, is exactly that type of approach.
Okay. So now let's talk about your facilities. Could you develop the Long Valley Farms projects?
Yeah, so currently we're doing, call it house and outdoor cultivation. We have numerous of buildings that are now part of the application process. But overall, our goal is, for now, we're going to be using a portion of the facilities to develop formulations that are non-controlled substance, using therapeutic plants, medicinal plants, as well as beneficial and functional therapeutic fungi. And then we'll add the cannabis products as the licensing comes through and we develop those facilities. We also, in the very near short term, we want to develop an IoT greenhouse, Internet of Things, which carries really the latest technology applications in the control of cultivation space, like a greenhouse with shading technology and fertilization systems and other systems that keep you 100% in control of the facility. Or in other words, to have a very perfect every day is why, these type of greenhouse we want to build. So that's the near term. And then we want to, as we grow the companies, grow the revenues, we certainly want to build our tissue culture facility, which will be the flagship building space. to produce the starter plant. Let's, like I said, we're already developing the model beyond just cannabis, whether it's just cannabis or other therapeutic plant species as we grow our formulas beyond cannabis. It's all remains to be grown, as they say,
Mhm.
and produced. So.
And so could you also talk about your second project, the one located in Leggett, California?
So this is, as I described, these facilities will be located in Leggett, California. That is the location. It's a 12-acre property that we're in, call it, as I mentioned earlier, an imminent acquisition stage. Just given the current status of just cannabis raw material, we have collectively together, along with Ethan Stiles, the CEO of Long Valley Farm, have undertaken to continue with the business development while we grow the company and we're ready, call it, to acquire. No sense to be acquiring the right now without the proper licenses and revenue model being built out. Whether Long Valley Farms owns it or Pharmagreen, only makes sense once we have the revenue model and the growth potential truly mapped and underway.
Okay, and so if we see like the bigger picture about the two projects, do you know when they would be both fully operational?
Yeah, so we're currently, the retail side is the first part of the project. We're shooting for sometime in September to have our first SKUs online. We're working, which we'll announce at the right time, with PhDs in that space to help us to maintain that highest level of efficacy. So the timeline is mid-September to get those online revenues started. And then basically to get the facilities built out would be the next facility would be a greenhouse, which we're planning to start the construction before the end of the year. It'll take us 5 months to complete. So completion date would be scheduled sometime for in the beginning of the first quarter of 2023.
Okay,
And then
so
after that would be, we would start the engineering and then of course the construction of the tissue culture facility, which will take about 2 years to complete from putting the shovel in the ground. So that's 1, 2, 3. First is revenues, get those going mid-September. Second, build the greenhouse, provide more of the raw material for our product SKUs that already will be, in the sales channels. And then the third one would be to solidify the genetics and the ability to produce the starter plantlets using tissue culture for our own production as well as third-party sales.
okay, so right now, does Pharmagreen have an online store, or you guys are currently working on it?
We're currently working on it. So we started the process of an online store. And like I said, our target for an online launch is sometime in September.
Okay, so now let's get to know more about you and your management board. So why have you joined Pharmagreen Biotech, and what's your motivation to make it successful?
Well, basically, I was in the cannabis space prior to that. I liked that space. I liked what Canada did, not, in terms of, it was a federal government's wish, but it was the wish of the general populace. And it was so proven in Canadian courts, which established a designated grower program. Why did I jump into it? I come from a medical family background, father cardiologist, mother dentist, and she contracted stage 4 cancer that spread from the breast to the bone. And I actually jumped right in, did the extraction of THC, capsulation, and I did the administration on my own mother. And the effects were phenomenal in terms of her recovery. She was then put in remission for a good 10, 15 years. About 3, 4 years ago, cancer did come back. She succumbed to the disease about 3 years ago. But in the meantime, seeing what it did for my mother really took me into that pace, into this mind space of therapeutics and what the product can provide. I continued to do that with quite a bit of success stories for those who are in my program, certainly extending their lives comfortably as well, because THC did manage the tumor growth as well as the pain associated. So it was quite positive. But to take it any further, certainly would have required more of a medical approach, clinical studies, And that was the thought sort of with Pharmagreen, why it led me to form the company, was to basically first I needed to have utmost control of the raw materials. So that way I could have consistency if you're doing plant-based therapies. It wasn't synthetic CBD or THC produced in a lab. It's a live plant. So you have to have your, cultivation procedures down, your initial starting material, your genetics. If you got that knowledge and access to that, you put that together, you can do deliverables of consistent, therapeutic, high efficacy rate plant and fungi-based medicines. And that's now, I'm very glad to be sharing that we're taking this, the company in that approach. We wanted to be more built out in the cannabis space already, but that doesn't mean we're certainly not building it, and it certainly means we're on our way to growing the company beyond just cannabis as well.
Mm-hmm. And what about your team? How is it? How is experience your team?
Well, that was part of Collido growing and amassing these level of expertise in our proprietary technology. So with the company, we have Terry Kwan, 40 years experience, as a chartered accountant. He has been a backdoor fixers for a number of companies, including Hyatt Steakhouse in Canada as well. So he's been back office compliance for public companies and a broker in that space of time. So, very solid guidance when it comes to being, in good reporting standards and financial management of the company. Then we have Dr. Fazia Afrine, PhD in botany. She's got a couple patents around the world on tissue culture technology. She's got numerous, published journal articles around the world throughout her career. So I would say she's a real scientific gem when it comes to tissue culture. And the latest team member is Ethan Stiles, CEO of Long Valley Farms. He's currently undertaking his PhD undergraduate studies for molecular biology. So we have a scientific team. There's more behind that than I'm mentioning now, but that will be mentioned as we sort of come out with our product lines as well. But a good company is only as good as its management. And I think we have that covered for sure.
So now let's take a look at your share structure and financials. Could you tell us how is your current corporate structure? How many shares are outstanding? This type of data.
Yeah. So we currently have about 424 million shares issued and outstanding on that side. We're currently looking at, as the market space overall is just, has not been, call it, favorable in the last few months, but what comes down does go up is just the nature of the cycle. So I think we're all hoping that we're kind of hitting the bottom, trend of the bottom in terms of, where we are economically, recession or no recession. And I think just as we also, get our organic news into the pipe as we're evolving the company, and as the market change spaces, I don't think it will be an issue as much of the shares issued outstanding. But what are you doing with the company? Some good solid organic news, some good marketing, IR behind the company as well to help spread that organic news. And then certainly market conditions. In my opinion, there will be, I think rebounding is a good word. And we put all that three together. I think you'll see also will be, reflected in our share price just the same.
And about your balance sheet, you recently, I think it was in May when you shared your financial statement. Could you develop about it? How's your balance sheet? Do you still have warrants?
We have, outstanding warrants. They've always been done at 5 cents per share. So certainly we crossed that threshold. We have an ability at 38 million issued and outstanding at a nickel, basically would give us about $1.9 million worth of coming into the company, which would be a substantial amount to build some of our infrastructure. So.
Mm-hmm. And so, because you were talking about your business model and the way how you intend to grow it, could you say once again how your business model works?
Yes. So currently our business model is to focus on establishing short-term revenues. And as we are in the cannabis space, which we have ready the raw materials to be, produced as live rosin and sold. Our live rosin, why is it better, call it, than somebody else's? Well, the farm is certified veganic and non-spray. Live rosin is a whole plant press type of product. So you want those certifications, and not very many farms do. So we have a current market demand for our live rosin. Unfortunately, we can't sell it until we receive a micro business license, because that involves the extraction portion of the licensing system. And until we have it, we can't sell those products. So we're not going to just sit there and wait, where we're at with our licensing. We have undertaken to produce those short-term revenues by producing formulation based on our collective knowledge, expert knowledge, that are highly therapeutic and functional. And we plan to be using a combination of medical plant species as well as fungi at the same time. So that's how our business model is: the short-term revenues on non-controlled substance formulations, selling them online. Then we will be adding the live rosin, which is THC derived, or call it cannabis marijuana derived, which we have sales pending to go in California state. And then as on a federal level, if that ever grows further, we certainly look to sales outside of California on the cannabis side products. And we will be expanding our, call it, non-controlled substance sales, not only throughout all of America initially, I should say North America, because it's non-controlled substance, so there's no issues selling it domestically or internationally. And then, of course, we would be looking to expand across the whole world. Our functional and therapeutic formulas ain't based on regions of the world. Humans are the same in that aspect everywhere. So.
Mm-hmm. Also, on your investor deck, you mentioned a 5-year plan about financial projections. Could you also discuss them?
Yes. So currently, I think our revenues from the greenhouse just on cannabis, because where the space is at, I could say they will remain the same, but I'll combine that. We'll take that raw biomass flower tops that will be produced, and we'll be making it into our own retail products. We'll be utilizing that, as opposed to initially we look just to sell the biomass. Give you an example: when we enacted this plan and this whole acquisition back in spring of last year, biomass grown outdoors in California was selling for $1,200 a pound. Today, that price is $250 to $300 a pound if you can sell it. So banking on that model, even if you're producing some of the highest quality, doesn't mean that you'll still actually sell it. Live rosin, because of the certification, would give us an additional leg up, but also an additional margin just the same. So the 5-year plan, we look revenues from the greenhouse and, call it, combined products made from it, to be in the 8 to 10 million a year range. The tissue culture startup plantlets will be produced from our operations, reducing our margin, increasing our quality again. And then third-party sales, cannabis and non, we see that to be around 30 million a year business model as well. So when you combine that in 5 years, we certainly look to hit 50 million plus in terms of gross annual sales. I think is a very, if we say what we do in terms of infrastructure, and to do that, means us raising the funds or growing out the revenue models, whichever comes first. But it's very, I think, feasible is a good word.
Mm-hmm. So we're almost about to end our interview. And so to help our viewers to understand more about the company and to remember what's important about Pharmagreen, could you quickly summarize your company's strength and highlights?
Our strength is the individuals behind us. It's also that we're aligned in the focus. We can't be dwelling in just one industry that is not healthy at the moment. And there's a lot of contraction among that industry, a lot of exits. So just dwelling on that, that would be our weakness. Our strength is the fact that we can identify that, and we have the skill set to venture beyond just cannabis, as we have announced. So we have the technology, we have the people, and we have the means to achieve sales through one of the most important factors is Pharmagreen, and the fact that it is public and gives us another leg up to be able to talk about our products.
And about short term, so for Q3 and Q4 of 2022, what could investors see going from Pharmagreen?
So in the next 2 quarters, the first quarter, I like to mention again that of our retail sales that we're planning to do, non-controlled substance, hopefully in the next quarter, and no later than the Q4, we receive the cannabis micro license as well. So therefore, again, what would that add? More products and more sales, whether at the distribution level or at the retail level, into dispensaries for our live rosin products. And then, lastly, in Q4 is that we begin the construction of the greenhouse, because it's a very important aspect for our own raw material that we need, cannabis and non-cannabis products development and sales.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter, to talk about Pharmagreen. We appreciate to get to know more about your company and the future. It looks definitely very promising.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a good day, you too.
You too.